right, peace. All right, happy Sabbath, y'all. Welcome back. So last time we talked, we were on the discussion about Samson and his connection with the Philistines. Now we know that the Philistines, from our last study, they came from the country of Crete or the southern Greece. Now we know some of Greek mythology that you may have heard about in school, even saw in Disney movies like Hercules. He was the quote unquote half god, half man, son of Zeus. Zeus was the god of the skies, god of thunder, god of lightning, and he was one of the main deities of Greece. And Hercules was his son. So we're going to read about the connection that Samson has to Hercules, or rather, to say that Hercules has from Samson, because Samson, for those of us who believe in the scriptures, Samson's a real person. Hercules is a mythological character that's actually based on Samson, and that mythology started because of Samson and the Danites' connection with the Philistines, who had a connection with the Greeks, and that's where that story originated from. But let's read. This is actually an interesting article that's going to talk about that connection. So, was Hercules Samson? This was written November 14th, 2022. This is just last year. And you see, this is Samson, or a depiction, not the accurate depiction of Samson wrestling a lion. So, who comes to mind as the most legendary strongman of antiquity? Probably two names: Hercules, a classical Greek lore where he is named Heracles. Hercules is the later Roman form, and the mighty biblical warrior Samson. Through their respective texts, these two individuals of renown have been immortalized to our present day as two of the mightiest men of antiquity or mythology. But two did not simply parallel one another in strength. In fact, uncanny parallels run right through the lives of those two individuals in deeds, period, and even ancestry. This begs the question: was Hercules Samson, or vice versa? Well, we know that Hercules is a version of Samson. This is basically the Greek mythological version of Samson, and we're gonna get to that. I'm gonna prove that later. Similarities indeed. Recognition in such parallels between these two Mediterranean heroes, both divinely imbued with strength, is nothing new. In 1963, it's taken to its perhaps cheesiest extent with Pietro Franceschi's epic, but now rather cringeworthy Italian film Ercole Sipta Samson. Hercules challenged Samson. Trailer below, English title: Hercules, Samson, and Ulysses, whose plot features Hercules and Samson being confused for one another by their deeds before they agree to join forces to fight against the Philistines. I never saw that movie. But such confusion of deeds for Samson and Hercules, while an intentional storyline for this movie, could be forgiven for the actual historical slash mythological individuals themselves. Consider the following rather remarkable parallels between the ancient accounts. Samson contained within the book of Judges, chapters 13 through 16. Hercules within the works of such authors as Homer in 8th century BCE, Sophocles 5th century BCE, and Euripides at 5th century BCE, and innumerable other later sources. And just so we can get the historical context, remember the um, the ancient Israelites, they came out of Egypt in uh about the I believe about the 13th century BCE. All right. So the story of Hercules started to get propagated in about the 8th century BCE. Now, it was probably about I believe about 1100 BCE. That's when King David was in power and rulership. All right. So just the context of ancient Israel with the rest of the historical world at that time. So these are some of the comparisons they had. Both men are divinely imbued with strength. Both killed a lion with their bare hands as their first main feat or labor of strength. Both were responsible for the death of their first wives in a fire. Both single handedly wiped out entire armies. Both faced off against the enemy that fielded giants in their armies. Both are known for their signature use of a club as weapons. Both are associated with two-headed canines: Hercules with the two-headed dog Orthus, Samson, who tied jackals together in twos in a plot against the Philistines. Both drank water that miraculously came from a rock. Both tore down the gates of a city. Both have repetitive weakness for women. Both were sentenced to slavery uh, by or at the hand of a woman. And it's not that they were destroyed because of a woman. It's because their lust of a woman. I hate it when biblical, commentators say that it was because of a woman. It wasn't because of the woman. It was their weakness for the woman. It's not the woman's fault that the man fell for her traps. You can't blame the woman. That's what the Most High constantly, reiterates in the scriptures. It's the man's responsibility to be the head. If you're the head of the woman and of your environment, you're supposed to take action and take control of your actions. You can't be susceptible to the nature of the woman. You know, Women are going to get you caught up. That's just their nature. But you have to be able to see the traps and how to navigate and how to properly put your women or your woman in a proper perspective in your life. You can't fall victim to that. So that's the lesson, one of the lessons that Samson should be teaching us. Never, and then, just kind of be careful. But both unwittingly met their ultimate demise at the hands of a lover, identified as a man destroyer who betrayed them. Oh, the list could go on. All these by merely coincidental, some perhaps, but all. All right. For those joining, we just talking about how Hercules is Samson. All right. Just a comparison. So differences in depth. Yet there is, of course, particular differences between the two accounts. Gary C. Cohen summed it up well in his 1970 Evangelical Quarterly article, Samson and Hercules, a comparison between the feats of Samson and the labors of Hercules. The deeds of the Hercules stories are completely in the fabulous realm. They are superhuman, arbitrary, and fantastic. Whatever the man behind the legends did, if such as one lived, the Hercules who has come to our generation is a fabulous character who conquers fabulous beasts by fabulous methods. It is a wild and fabulous tale which is both interesting and amusing. It is an excellent fiction. On the flip side, with Samson, on the other hand, the account of Samson is portrayed in the Bible in the light of a man given power and duty from the Holy God. True, he is aided by the supernatural power. He is angelically announced before his birth, but in the biblical Christian conservative framework, this is seen to be the sober truth. For the God of miracles does exist. Samson's feats are astounding, but never fabulous. His strength is colossal, but it is human strength aided by the God of all power. Indeed, the accounts surrounding the life of Hercules slash Heracles are in the realm of fantastical fiction, in no sense believable. In one of his labors, he defeats a nine-headed serpentine monster, for whom every time a head is severed, two more grow in its place. In another labor, he captures the herd of a three-headed six giant Gurion. In another, he defeats a 100-headed dragon guarding a tree of golden apples. Although there is an uncanny underlying core resemblant in Genesis 3. In another labor, Hercules makes a deal with Hades to retrieve a three-headed dog from the underworld. You know, and the one thing, because when people they compare Hercules and the stories that a lot of these other cultures they make mythos and like a mythological tale of real people. That's why when we talked about like the flood and Noah, like we see other cultures, they have the same story of a flood. They just have it in a kind of a dramatic way. It's almost like if you trying to tell a child a story, you put a little extra flavor on the story to make them kind of be more interested in the story. So the same way these cultures, especially like the Philistines and the Greeks, when they heard about a man like Samson who had that much strength and was basically killing their people, they had to kind of mythologize him to kind of make him not as threatening anymore. Even for their own psyche. Like a therapist training their or a therapist teaching their client how to deal with a traumatic situation and not make it so frightening to them anymore. So it's the same way that the Greeks they tried to mythologize Samson and they created this fictional character Hercules, but they are the same person. This is a picture of a version of Hercules fighting off that, you know, um, multiple headed serpent. As you see, he's always, depicted in the ancient Greek. He's always depicted with black skin, dark skin. But clearly, a bulk of Hercules' feats are in the realm of ludicrous fiction. Yet, even the most unlikely legends do not typically form out of complete vacuum. As such, numerous researchers have postulated a core historicity to the legend of the strong man Hercules, and there is no more tantalizing connection with such an array of parallels as that of the biblical Samson. Naturally, the more believable nature and presentation of Samson count on its own favors. This as the originating core model on which later Herculean legend has built and over extrapolated, but more on that further down. All right, let's keep going. All right, according to the biblical chronology, the strongman Samson was on the scene sometime around 1100 BCE. He was notably a biblical judge of the tribe of Dan. This tribe was divided into two main territories, one in the Mediterranean coast, bordering the Philistines, from which territory Samson's hailed. See the map below, and one inland on Israel's northern border. As you see, Dan was right here. As you see, they're close to the Philistine border. They're Dan and Judah. So it was very common that the Israelites, they intermix with their neighbors, the Canaanites, but Dan, especially with the Philistines. And we see that in the book of Judges where, Samson, he took Philistine women as his wives, his first wife, and then the second one, Delilah. So if the judge was doing that, you can imagine just the common man was intermixing with the Philistine people. And there's something unusual that archaeologists have discovered when it comes to the Danite territory. It is a replete with Greek influence. For example, remains the capital city of the Danites, the northern territory of Tel Dan, identified on this map on the northern border of Naphtali, show heavy Greek Mycenaean connection in household items, weaponry, burials, and idolatry, etc. So much so that the Haaretz archaeology contributor Philip Bostrom wrote a highly recommended article on the subject titled Tribe of Dan, Sons of Israel, or of the Greek mercenaries hired by Egypt. And as we see, they were the people that lived on the coast, Manasseh, Asher, Dan, they were, they were sailors. They were able to branch out to different areas. So there were all, even before the Assyrian captivity, there were Israelites that already migrated to different parts of the Mediterranean to kind of search more lands. Because one thing about Dan, the territory of Dan, they thought their inheritance was so small that they wanted to, expand themselves. And that's why, they mixed in with different sea people to travel out. This peculiar connection between the tribe of Dan and the Greek world has long been noticed by scholars and is identified in several biblical passages. Ezekiel 26:19 attests to Dan also in Javan, the biblical name for Greece. If you look up the word Javan, it does mean Greece, but when you read about how the Dorians invasion of Greece, they pushed over Javan, or what modern historians call the Ionians. They moved them eastward towards what we call Turkey. So they moved over there. They got pushed out of Greece and into Turkey. That's the sons of Japheth. And they formed what was called the Ionian League. The Ionians were the sons of Japheth. And they went over to Turkey. But let me read that again. Ezekiel 29:19 attests to Dan also in Javan, the biblical name for Greece, going to and fro and sea trade. And the Judges account preceding the time of Samson condemns the tribe of Dan for not participating in the overthrow of the Canaanite oppression because they were out sojourning in ships. Judges 5:17. That's when the prophetess Deborah and Barak, they were able to overcome, I believe, the Midianites, and it was like they were able to take over that captivity. But they said that the people of Dan were out on ships, so they weren't defending the land. So they were always, they were already even before, the kingdom of David even was established. They were already not connected to the land. Uh, Coincidentally, the Greek poet Homer writes about a certain Mycenaean seafaring tribe out in their ships around this time that participated in the Battle of Troy. Remember that movie Troy with what's his name? Brad Pitt. It was a movie. Troy came out as like 2000, early 2000s. It was a really good movie. Um, Not accurate depiction, of course, but it's a really good movie. But the city of Troy, um, Helen of Troy. It was these all these Greek cities. They were all fighting against the city of Troy. But it's really good, very accurate, and it talks about different people. That's what actually when the book of Homer, the Odyssey, or the poet Homer in the book of Odyssey talks about different cultures, and they use that book as a historical evidence that a lot of these cultures actually existed. And in the book, the movie, the Battle of Troy, really showed that all these Greek city states came together: the Spartans, the Athenians, um, all these Greek city states. But they said that there was another seafaring tribe, people known as the Noai, also named Danaan. These Noai, descendants of a patriarch named Danaus, have also been linked with the mysterious seafaring Levantine people known from various inscriptions as Dinyan. The famous late Israel archaeologist Professor Yigael Yadin posited that these people were one of the same of the tribe of Dan, and that would make sense because, like I said, they were traveling. They were on the seas. They were very close to the Mediterranean. They were close to the Greeks. They were close to the Philistines. So it's very uh, likely that that was who they came from. Thus, because stories of the Danite strongmen Samson have found their way into Greece by the seafaring tribe of Dan. His contact with the Mycenaean world, perhaps via their merchant men, whose name in Hebrew is Haraklim, a word what some posit as the etymologic origin for the Greek name Hercules. Or perhaps such stories could have been passed around the Mediterranean by the descendants of the Philistines, the neighboring tribe of Dan's adversaries, themselves a seafaring Mediterranean polity connected with Greece. And it's most likely a mixture between the two. Like you said, they intermix with each other. And that's why when in the last study, we talked about how the origins of the Philistines, they had a mixed composite about them because we know the Philistines, they were the sons of Ham, but then they also had European ancestry. And so we know that they intermixed with different tribes around them. They were a seafaring people, but they came from what we call North Africa, intermixed with some people over in the Levant or Palestine. They mixed with people in Greece, and they became what we call the Philistines, but what history they call them the sea people, and a lot of them were of the tribe of Dan. Yeah, this kind of gets in. Oh, let's go to the links go further ahead, much further afield, because according to the ancient Irish folk histories, Ireland was settled by people known as the Tuatha Danann, which can be translated as tribe of Dan, Danann, tribe of Danann. Compare again with Homer's Danann. The famous early 11th century CE Irish text Libor Gabalan Aaron, Book of the Taking of Ireland, relates that this tribe of Danann had landed by ships in Ireland from the Mediterranean to the second millennium BCE after having been in a constant state of war with the Philistines. Sounds familiar? Many of the folk legends surrounding the Tuatha De Danann are also uncannily similar in style to those of Greeks and Hercules. Could such a migration of early Irish connection with the Mediterranean explain why a royal Philistine still ended up in Ireland? That's a possibility, but most likely it wasn't just always the Danes, it's also the Canaanites as well. Because, like I said, they were all traveling to those areas. It wasn't just the tribe of Dan. This is a Philistine seal that's in Ireland. They found this in Ireland. So, like I said, there was people that were traveling not just to the Mediterranean and to the Iberia and like Spain and Portugal. They were traveling up to France, the Franks, and all the way up to the New England, or I'm sorry, to the United Kingdom of England and Wales, Ireland, Scotland. Uh, Added to all this is just accident that the Israelite tribe of Dan, one of the most powerful populous tribes, in fact, the second biggest by a good margin, as revealed by the book of Numbers, censuses at the time of the Exodus, all but disappears from the biblical record. Following the Exodus account, apart from a handful of token references, and at that, a majority of them unfavorable, highlighting their brutality and paganism. What happened to this tribe? Where did they go? Enter an intriguing connection to the Exodus and a growing theory that a part of the Israelites following the Exodus settled in Greece, particularly those of the tribe of Dan, because here again, just as Samson was of the Danite tribe, a Hebrew Adonai, Hercules himself was a Danaoi. And the Danaoi, according to the classic Greek historians, fled into Greece out of Egypt. So you see, even they're making the connections between the book of, or the tribe of Dan and just the Greeks, you know. So, and they're making a great connection. It actually goes very deep because the original Greek language comes from the Hebrew. It's just a different type of the script. But that's, you know, they don't really talk about this. That's why it's like when you read about the etymology of words, they always go back to the Latin or they go to the Greek. They never go past that because if you go past the Greek, then you will understand there's a connection between the Greek and the Hebrew languages or the Phoenician languages. And that's too much of a connection that people will start to tie into understanding that, hey, I think the original people of Greece weren't who they look like today. They must have came from, you know, that area. Um, okay. I think that's good. It's a good article though. I don't want to get out all to all of it because it is kind of long. So let's go into more about this part. This is Sparta. Now, you know, Sparta, you know, that movie 300, that was based off the kingdom of Sparta. So let's just read just a little quick entry about Sparta. What is it and where does it come from? So Sparta was a prominent city state in Laconia in ancient Greece. In antiquity, the city state was known as uh, Lacedaemon, 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 while the name Sparta refers to a main settlement on the banks of the Eurotas River in Laconia, southeastern Peloponnese, in southeastern Peloponnese. Around 650 BC, it rose to become the dominant military land power in ancient Greece. And that's around that time when Persia was basically taking over the kingdom. That's when they eventually would have that cataclysmic battle, what they call 300. That was out around like the 600s BC. And you see this right here is the kingdom of Lacedaemon, and you know, we see this is just southern Greece, this ancient Sparta. Now, it's something that, if you may notice, the Spartans were known to have a Spartan braid. They were known to braid their hair because when they were in battle, it's time when the Spartans they lived at war, so they will always have their hair braided up because you know in war you don't really have time to take care of your hair. So if you just Google Spartan braid, this will always show up. You know, these braids like this. Even this is like the TV show, the Greeks. I forget what it's called, but this is how they make the Spartans look, and this is not how the Spartans look. And we know this because there are statues that depicts the ancient Spartans. So let's see what the statues look like. This is an ancient statue of a Spartan, as we see. You know, this is his face. This is the bust, and in the back, you see it looks like these. These are the braids of the ancient Spartans. It's not, you know, one or two locks that they try to make like a European that's braiding his hair. This is how, you know, the Spartans look. They had what we call, you know, dreadlocks, but they had long braids that went straight down to their back. This is another depiction of a Spartan braid. And as you see, it's just, you know, long locks that come out of the side of their helmets. And you see it's long and it's like that. In the same way that Samson was known to have 7 locks that went down his back. And again, no, same thing. Now, the Dorians, the Dorians, let's just read this. The Dorians were one of the four major ethnic groups onto which the Hellenes or classic Greece divided themselves along with the Aeolians, the Achaeans, and the Ionians. They are almost always referred to as just the Dorians, as they were called the earliest literary mention of them in the Odyssey, where they already can be found inhabiting the island of Crete. Now we know that we read that the Philistines came from Crete, right? So is there a connection with these people? I don't know. Let's read. There were a diverse in way of life. They were a diverse in way of life and social organization, varying from populous trade center in the city of Corinth. Now we know about Corinth because we read about the letters from Paul that he wrote about to the Corinthians, right? So known for its ornate style and art and architecture, to the isolationist military state of Sparta. And yet all the Hellenes knew which localities were Dorian, which were not. Dorian states at war could more likely, but not always, count on the assistance of other Dorian states. Dorians were distinguished by the Doric Greek dialect and characteristic social and historical traditions. All right. And in the 5th century BC, Dorians and Ionians were the two most politically important Greek ethni, whose ultimate clash resulted in the Peloponnesian War, a degree of which 5th century Hellenes self-identify as Ionian or Dorian has itself been disputed. At one extreme, Edward Will concludes that there was no true ethnic component in 5th century Greek culture in spite of anti-Dorian elements in Athenian propaganda. And at that time, the Peloponnesian War was the Spartans. They were fighting against the Athenians, and they were the Athenians. That's where like Socrates, a lot of philosophers came from, but they didn't like the Spartans, so a lot of negative propaganda went against the Spartans or the Dorians. But I just want to read about where that word comes from. That word Dorian comes from. So like I like going into the etymology of things like that. So let's just read this first paragraph, and we're gonna go down to the bottom where it says chosen Greeks. A man's name Dorius occurs in Linear B tablets at Pylos, one of the regions later invaded and subjugated by the Dorians. Pylos tablet FN 867 records or records it in the dative case as Dorije or doorway, a third in consonant declension noun with stems ending in W. In unattested nominative plural, doorways would have become dories by loss of the W and contraction. The tablet records the grain rations issued to the servants of religious dignitaries celebrating a religious festival, Hania, the mother goddess. The nominative singular Dorius remains the same in the classical period. Many linear B names of servants were formed from their home territory or in the places where they came from my Mycenaean ownership. It sometimes happened that different derivations of the Indo-European word exploit similar sounding Indo-European roots. Greek, Doru, lands, is from the O grade or Indo-European Doru, solid in the sense of wood. It is similar to the extended from Doro or do, give, as can be seen in the modern Greek imperative dos, to give, appearing in Greek, Doron, gift. This is the path by taking Jonathan Hall, relying on elements taken from the myth of the return of the Hercules. Hall cites a tradition based on a fragment of poet Tertius that Sparta is a divine gift granted by Zeus and Hera to the Hercules. In another version, Tyndareus gives his kingdom to Heracles in gratitude for restoring him to the throne. But Heracles asked the Spartan king to safeguard the gift until his descendants might claim it. Now that's very similar to, the story of Abraham. The Most High blessing Abraham with a gift, a promise, and he said, he's eventually going to bless his descendants through his son Isaac and eventually Jacob. Uh, and then right here, Hall therefore proposes that the Dorians are the people of the gift. They assume the name on taking possession of the Lacedaemon. Doris was subsequently named after them. Hall makes comparisons of Spartans to Hebrews as a chosen people, maintaining a covenant with God and being assigned a holy land. To arrive at this conclusion, Hall relies on Herodotus' version of the myth. See below that the Hellenes under Doris did not take his name until reaching the Peloponnesus. In other versions, the Heraclidae enlisted the help of the Dorian neighbors. Hall does not address the problem of the Dorians not calling the Lacedaemon Doris, but assigning that name to some less holy, remoter land. Similarly, he does not mention the Dorian servant at Pylos, whose sacred gift, as such it was still being ruled by the Achaean Altra family at Lacedaemon. Citation needed. Because a lot of this is he's just making observations, but he's making a connection again from the last article we read how these people, the Dorians, just like how we read how the people of the Danites were like seem as the connection that they're kind of forming together. That these people were like a chosen people, especially when it goes talking about the myth of Hercules or Heracles getting this gift of a nation of he's given this gift of land and he was giving it to his descendants. Uh, Going back to this word Heraclidae, that word Heraclidae, it means the descendants of Hercules or Heracles. I thought it was somewhere in here, but that's when it says Heraclidae. That's what that means. Let's look it up real quick. The Heraclidae were the numerous descendants of Hercules or Heracles, especially applied in a narrow sense to the descendants of Hylas, the elder of his four sons by Danaus. Hylas was also sometimes thought of as Heracles, son of Malit. Other Heraclidae include Macaria, Lamos, Manto, Bianor, Teoplomes, and Teoplus. These Heraclids were a group of Dorian kings who conquered the Peloponnesian kingdom of Mycenae, Sparta, and Argos. According to the literary tradition in Greek mythology, they claimed to a right to rule through their ancestor, and that's very similar to what Israel does today with their land. They say that they have the right to this land because it was given to them by their ancestor. That's why I say it's very connection with these people and the Danites or the Israelites in general, but specifically the Danites who intermixed with the Philistines. All right. Now let's keep going. This is from the Apocrypha. This is the Book of Maccabees. Like I said, the Book of Maccabees is really good for history to understand what happened between the Book of Malachi and the Book of Matthew. So this is chapter 12, the first book. We're just going to read what talks about this and we're going to get this connection from the biblical source. So now, when Jonathan saw that time served him, he chose certain men and sent them to Rome for to confirm and renew the friendship that they had with them. Jonathan was one of the rulers of the Maccabean period. So he held his own, or the Maccabees held their own against the Greeks, and then once the Romans came along, they formed a somewhat an alliance with the Maccabean people, or what the Bible we call the Hasmonean dynasty. That's who Herod was married to one of the daughters of the Hasmonean princes, which eventually he took the life of, and he became a tyrant. But that's who Jonathan comes from. He's a descendant of Maccabees. So he sent letters also to the Lacedaemonians. And we know the Lacedaemonians were the Spartans, and to other places for the same purposes. So let's read what he said in this letter. So they went into Rome and entered into the Senate and said, Jonathan, the high priest, and the people of the Jews sent us unto you. To the end you shall renew the friendship which you had with them in league as in former time. Upon this, the Romans gave them letters unto the governors of every place that they should bring them into the land of Judea peaceably. And this is the copy of the letters which Jonathan wrote to the Lacedaemonians. Jonathan, the high priest, and the elders of the nation, and the priests and the others of the Jews, unto the Lacedaemonians, Lacedaemonians, their brethren, send greeting. There were letters sent in times past unto Ananias, the high priest, from Darius, who reigned then among you, to signify that ye are our brethren, as the copy here under with specify. So Jonathan, he's specifying that the Lacedaemonians or the Spartans are their brothers. So that we're the same people. At which the time Ananias entreated the ambassador that was sent honorably and received the letters wherein declaration was made of the league and friendship. Therefore, we also, albeit we need know he of these things, that we have the holy books of Scripture in our hands to comfort us, have nevertheless attempted to send you unto you the renewing of brotherhood and friendship, lest we should become strangers unto you altogether. For there is a long time past since you sent unto us. We therefore at all times without ceasing, both in our feasts and other convenient days, do remember you in the sacrifices which we offer in our prayers, as reason is, as it has become us to think of our brethren, and we are right glad of your honor. As for ourselves, we had great troubles and wars on every side, for so much as the kings that are round about us have fought against us. Albeit we should not be troublesome unto you, nor to others of our confederate and brothers in these wars, for we have help from heaven that secureth us, so as we are delivered from our enemies, and our enemies are brought under foot. For this cause we chose Numenius, the son of Antiochus, and Antipater, the son of Jason, and sent them unto the Romans to renew the amity that we had with them in the former league. We commanded them also to go unto you and to salute to deliver to you our letters concerning the renewing of our brotherhood. Wherefore now you shall do well to give us unto thereto. And this is the copy of letters which now are sent. Arius king, the Lacedaemonians, to Ananias the high priest, greeting. It is found in writing that the Lacedaemonians and the Jews are brethren. They are of the stock of Abraham. So even in the Bible, first book of Maccabees, they attest that the Lacedaemonians or the Spartans and the Jews are of the same stock of Abraham. So they actually, they already knew that these people who were in, southern Greece, they were the descendants of the same people. They understood that even at that time. Right. So let's keep going. Now, therefore, since this come to our knowledge, you shall do well to write unto us your prosperity. We do write back again to you that your cattle and goods are ours, and ours are yours. We do command, therefore, our ambassadors to make report unto you on this wise. And now, when Jonathan heard that the Mebius princes were come to fight against him with a greater host than before, he removed from Jerusalem and met them in the land of Mathis, and he gave them no respite to enter his country. All right. So that's all I just want to, because it's going into some other stuff, but I just want them to highlight that they understood the Lacedaemonians and the Jews were of the same stock of Abraham. And as we just read, most likely, these were the people of the Danites who were, intermixed in that land, or they, with the Philistines or the Greeks, and they formed their own identity as Lacedaemonians. So they mixed in, their understanding of what the Most High had told their ancestors, and they mixed it in with the, paganism of their time. So, but even the Jews or the people of Judea at that time, they were trying to reconnect with their lost brethren who were lost for a long time. All right. Oh. Now let's go to 1 Corinthians. This 1 Corinthians chapter 10. So the title says, "Avoid Israel's mistakes." Paul, he talks to the Corinthians about this. So he says, "Moreover, brethren," he's talking to the Corinthians now, "I would not that you should be ignorant now, or how that our fathers were under the cloud and all passed through the sea." Now, what cloud he was talking about? When the Most High, he was, he said, he was going to lead the people out from Egypt into the promised land. He was going to be a pillar of fire by night, and he was going to be a cloud by day. So he's saying that we passed under that cloud. Is what he's talking about. Our fathers passed under this cloud. So he's talking about even the Corinthians forefathers, they passed under this cloud. We all were part of this covenant that we made. So verse 2. And we're all baptized onto Moses in the cloud and in the sea, and did all eat the same spiritual meat, and did all drink the same spiritual drink. And they drank of that spiritual rock that followed them, and that rock was Christ. But with many of them, God was not pleased, for they were overthrown in the wilderness. And now these things were our examples, to the intent we should not lust after evil things, as they also lusted. Neither be ye idolaters, as were some of them. As it is written, the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. And neither let us commit fornication, as some of them committed and fell in one day 23,000. Neither let us tempt Christ, and some of them also tempted and were destroyed by serpents. Neither murmur ye, as some of them were murmured and were destroyed of the destroyer. Now all these things happen unto them for ensamples, that and they are written for our admonition, upon whom the end of the world are come. Wherefore let him that think he stands take heed lest he fall. All right. So Paul is warning these people that, don't make the same mistakes that they did. Even our forefathers, we have been given a time period of mercy to repent and come back to do the right thing, basically. So, that's what Paul was speaking to the Corinthians. So who are the Corinthians, or who are these people in Corinth? What is Corinth? Let's just read a little bit about this so we can kind of connect some of the stuff that we are just reading. So Corinth, being satiated, an ancient famous city of Greece on the isthmus of Corinth, and about 40 miles west of Athens. So Corinth, a metropolis of Achaean proper, situated on the isthmus of the Peloponnesus, between the Aegean and Ionian seas, hence called Vimeris, and having two harbors, one of which called Cancri was the roadstead for the ships from Asia, and the other was called Latium or Latium for ships from Italy. It was utterly destroyed by Mummius, the Roman consular, in the Achaean War, but after the lapse of the century, it was rebuilt by Julius Caesar. It was eminent in commerce and wealth, in literature and arts, especially the study of rhetoric and philosophy, but it was notorious also for luxury and moral corruption, particularly the foul worship of Venus. Paul came to the city in the second missionary journey, circa AD 53 and 54, and founded there a Christian church. All right, so again, Corinth was in that same area, the Peloponnesus. So I was just saying how we're kind of connecting things together. We're starting from the time of Samson and the Danites, their connection with the Philistines. We know the Philistines came from Greece, and now we see how the reason why Paul made a lot of missionary trips over to Greece, a lot of these Greek cities, because even like I say, even at that time, they understood our people, they were spread to different parts of the Mediterranean, particularly. But even by that time, by Paul, they were spread even all the way through India, North Africa, and up, towards Turkey and above. So. But yeah, that's kind of just a short story about that. We're going to continue more because it's like I said, the history of Palestine is so it's a lot of history to that, especially when it comes to the Bible, the biblical history, and we can kind of get into more understanding why that land is so cherished to a lot of people. That's going to be part 3.